Okay, so what I'm going to show you today, guys, is something that we're working on, and it's to do, it's called Sweet CRM Analytics, or Sweet CRM Power Analytics, and how we use Hop to bridge some of the bits that we need for this solution. So a quick introduction, who I am, for the people that don't know me. My name is Harris Ward. I'm an open source business intelligence solution developer. I sort of think, what am I really? But there you go. And I work for Ivy Information Scotland Limited. The last 15, 16, 17 years, I've worked primarily in open source business intelligence, and being open source business intelligence, that has included mostly Pentaho data integration and Pentaho business intelligence server data integration for doing our ETL, and the business intelligence server for building reports and dashboards and monitoring cubes and things like that. Recently, obviously, we looked into using Apache Hop, particularly because of its functionality, its support that it gets. Yeah, so coming from something like Pentaho data integration to Apache Hop was an easy step to make, and we feel it's better maintained, more functional, and has a brighter future than Pentaho data integration. So we recently started using Apache Hop and used it for a couple of things, and we've also started using a bit of Power BI just as a bit of a stopgap. I mean, we're looking for good open source software. Power BI is not so much open source; it's free. And it does some pretty cool stuff. So we thought, we're going to build a solution using Apache Hop for our sort of data integration work, data engineering, and Power BI to build some dashboards. And if you want to contact me for any reason, there's my email address, which you can reach me at. So I want to go over what Sweet CRM Power Analytics is. There's two parts that we have. One is a data integration part, which we obviously use Apache Hop for, and the other is Power BI, which is the front end. So it's like your conventional data warehouse and business intelligence solution. If you come from a Pentaho background, you'd be using Pentaho data integration to build your data warehouse, and Pentaho business server to build your reports and dashboards. This is the same kind of idea. We're just using Apache Hop and Power BI instead. So our Sweet CRM data integration component, it's a dimensional model built with Apache Hop. Not a particularly exciting dimensional model. It's just your bog standard data warehouse with facts, dimensions, and a dimensional model. And what we've done is we've packaged it, and this is what this talk is about, as a kind of like a Windows application. And we've done it because our end users are using Power BI, and we thought, if these end users use Power BI and they use Windows, we kind of want to give them something where it feels easy to use. Not that Apache Hop isn't easy to use for developing things, but maybe to deploy it, install it, and run it, and things like that. Just kind of like a bit of eye candy on top of our copy of Hop. So we used Node.js and Electron. Electron is a library. If you're not familiar with Electron, it's a library on top of Node.js that allows you to use Node.js to build kind of like Windows applications. If you've ever used, for example, Slack as a Windows application, or maybe even Linux application, if you've installed it onto your computer, then that's built in Electron. It looks like a Windows application, it acts like a Windows application, but what it actually is technically Chrome's V8 JavaScript sort of browser packaged in with Node.js and deployed, as a kind of sort of like, there's your application, use it like a real application. It's not really a website, even though it's all built in JavaScript, so nice and easy to build. The Power Analytics part, we built a Power BI template application. Now, Power BI, you can download a desktop version, which is free, and you can build dashboards, connect to all sorts of data sources and build dashboards and reports. A template application is a Power BI file that you can deploy to the Microsoft Marketplace, put it up there, and other people can download it and use it. So just like your marketplace applications, it's like a template you can build, put it online, other people can install it and use it on top of their databases. What we've done, obviously, is we've built a template application. It's very limiting, template applications compared to desktop applications, but we worked around this the best we could. And when we wrote a bunch of reports and dashboards that will sit on top of our Sweet CRM. And like I mentioned earlier, it's installed via the Microsoft App Marketplace. So just to give you, it's a really simple setup. If you guys are familiar with CRMs, you might have heard of Suite CRM. Suite CRM is a fork of Sugar CRM. I think a couple of years back, Sugar CRM started closed sourcing some of their stuff, and a company here in Scotland actually called Sales Agility decided to fork Sugar CRM into Suite CRM. It's a PHP MySQL CRM, so you can imagine it's like a website sort of thing. They forked it, put it under the AGPL license, so it's nice and open source. And it's an application I've used for many years, for my CRM. And it's because I use it a lot that I found that I needed to analyze data that I had from customers inside the CRM. So we kind of have an interest in it, and we thought we would build something on top of it. So we have our web application, which is CRM and MySQL database. And what we've done is our data integration part, as I mentioned, is a copy of Hop wrapped in kind of like this Electron user interface, which has the dimensional model, the fact tables, the fact ETL dimensions, things like that. And then we send it to a Microsoft Azure SQL database where users can then download a copy of our template app, Power BI template app, which has the dashboards and reports pre-built, and they can connect to that Azure database. What we're doing is facilitating the data coming from their Suite CRM instance all the way to Power BI. So people that use Suite CRM and have their own data can install our little Hop Electron app, send the data to their Azure database, and then connect their Power BI to it, all in the Azure data in the Azure cloud. Excuse me. So the components that we have, what we actually have to do this is sort of like chunks that we have. We have to start by downloading a copy of Hop, and Hop comes in a nice, the version I have at least, comes at about 568 megabytes. Now, what I liked about Hop compared to things like PDI is if you download PDI, it's about 2 gigabytes, I think, maybe just under, maybe just over, I'm not sure. But it's a large application to pass off to people and say, hey, download our, so it's like downloading Windows printer drivers or something. You get like a 2 gigabyte printer driver. You think that's crazy. Well, we wanted to start with Apache Hop and strip it down as much as we could, and that was surprisingly easy for us. We could jump into folders and just start deleting, libraries and plugins. And then we could reduce it to about 139 megabytes, which is great for delivery if people want to download our software. We don't want to ask them to download a 2 gigabit file and them to ask, why is it so big? It's just a simple application. Once we'd stripped it down, we developed our data warehouse where we built a framework. The framework is a relatively simple framework that allows us to run what we call modules. Modules are collections of fact tables and fact transformations and dimension transformations that we want to run. So let's say that you're running like a module that we call the support module, which gets case information from the CRM. Then it would only ever need things like the cases fact table, the customers table, the agents table. So this little framework just allows us to group things up and place them into these what we call modules. And I'll show you how that works afterwards. We built a dimensional model, obviously, that is used for our data warehouse. And then finally, we developed the actual ETL workflow and pipelines to load data from Suite CRM into our dimensional model. We also developed this Node.jS Eletron application. And this is to help us just configure and run the ETL. Now, it's not hard to configure or run ETL and Hop. It's not. It's just that, again, we wanted a bit of eye candy on top, wrapped up in this nice little installation that says, hey, look, users, this is this tool. It'll extract your data and put it into a data warehouse. You don't have to edit a text file. It's not difficult. It's just kind of a bit of eye candy. So this tool that we built just sets some parameters, database credentials, and things like that. Allows the execution of our workflows and downloading of log files. It's pretty straightforward. And finally, we took these 3 components, Apache Hop, our ETL, our data warehouse or ETL solution, and our Node.js application, and we packaged it into a little Windows installer using NSIS. Not sure what NSIS stands for, but it's an installer. It allows you to build installers for Windows. I'm not too sure if it works for Linux, but it works for Windows. So the setup, what we expect our users to do, simply would be to, assuming they've got a copy of Suite CRM, they would download and install their Suite CRM data integration using our Windows installer, a simple executable file. They will configure their database connections using the Electron application interface, and then they would run the ETL, which in this case creates our dimensional model and populates it on the first run. Once they've got their data in their Azure database, they want to connect their Power BI to it. So they'll install the Power BI template from the Microsoft Marketplace. You can just go there, search for the template and install it. They would register their details with our website because we are managing keys with these guys to make sure, we've got a free-ish version where you can do all sorts of reports and a not so free version. So you register your details with us, which sends data to a few of our servers, and then you receive a license key, which we also use Hop to fill that gap. That'll be part of my Stripe talk a little bit later on. And then finally, once they have their key, they can configure the Power BI template to connect their database, and they get the data that they expect to see. So I'm going to have a look at my VM here, which I got everything running this morning to get it working, and just kind of go through this two other pieces. Are there any questions so far of interest, guys, or does that kind of make sense what we're kind of trying to build?
Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, that's fair enough. I don't want to bore people too much with PowerPoint and things. So this is part of the solution we have. This is the ETL that we built, and again, it is straightforward. This is the wrong ETL. Apologies. This is the ETL here. It'll be right here. So I've got Hop running in Linux. And I've got Hop running in Windows for different purposes and things. So it's the framework's very basic. It's not particularly advanced or anything like that. But what we do is we built this little this main job, and it takes in a simple parameter, what module do you want to run? And when we pass in what module it wants to run, I'll show you the module JSON file in a second. We parse that JSON. So we read in a JSON file, and then we get all the information from it to say what particular pieces of ETL will we be running. And then we output those to result, at which point we will then start executing our transformation. So I remember this is an execute pipeline. I think in here, I find it hard not to right click on things, guys. It's difficult. I'm getting used to it still. Obviously you can't not by default, you can't right click on things, and I keep doing it. So we come through and say, look, are we running a pipeline or are we running a workflow? And dependent, we run that particular file to say, look, we're running that piece of information. And if I show you what our JSON looks like, our JSON looks a little bit like this. So it's a straightforward bit JSON. This is a module definition. And here we've got an area. So we're saying this is the initialization area in this case. And the demo I'll show will just be running a dummy workflow. So we have it a name, we give it a version. We say it's a workflow execution. It's in a particular folder, and that's our workflow name. And this dummy one, this workflow, all it does is it runs, it waits for 2 or 3 seconds, and then it finishes. It's just a dummy. And then it runs the next one, which same thing. It runs for 1 or 2 seconds, and then it stops. But that's kind of like our definition. So that's the JSON that we would look through and say, look, let's look at this JSON, cut it to pieces, and then we know what our framework will build. And we have an area for staging, dimensions, facts, and additional. So a dummy JSON, a dummy module looks like that. Our master JSON, which does a lot more. For example, the first stage is creating, doing our DDL, priming our tables, doing all our staging transformations, then down to our dimensions, down to our facts, and finally some additional at the end, like post-processing ETL. So all our ETL isn't actually joined in one big job. All our ETL could be run separately as individual transformations. And as an example, the populate activities fact table is a simple piece of ETL that you just see in any other fact table sort of population sort of thing. But this doesn't have its own parent job. There is no parent job. The main job is the main job here that loops through and cherry picks based on the JSON file which ETL you want to run. So we can kind of, I said, cherry pick what we want to put, what we want to run, place them into JSON files and say run that or run that and run that. It's not a particularly exciting framework. It's just one that allows us a bit of flexibility. So that's the ETL, which builds a regular, simple data warehouse. And if we actually look at the installation or configuration of the rest of it, so with our data warehouse in place, let me just minimize that. We have a few other steps we want to follow. So we've got our data warehouse and it's been developed. We have our project here, and we have our NSIS installer, and it's I've got one open here. And what I'll do is this NSIS installer, it's a Windows installer, just packages your files for you. I'll just run this, and it should only take a minute, and it'll package a copy of Hop. It'll package all our ETL. It'll also package our Node.js application into a single executable, which I'm going to hopefully run and then install. So we would package this for users, upload it somewhere, and they would be able to download it. I can't remember exactly how big it is, but we'll see when it's finished how big the entire package is. It's a little bit smaller than a little bit bigger than the 139 megabytes that Hop commands, because our Node.js application obviously requires a bit of space. So I'll let that run and make sure nothing else is open. Nope. Actually compiled. Okay. So our total application size that we would deliver to clients would be 239 megabytes. So we build our code here, again with our ETL, and Hop is packaged here. And then we could pass it to a user and we can run it supposedly. So we're going to go ahead, and this is, I'm imagining that I've just downloaded this and I'm running my installer. So we have a basic license agreement. If we want to create a shortcut where we want to install it. And when I install it, what it'll do is, what's kind of helpful is it configures some parts of Hop to create the correct home directories for our project and things like that. So if we pass this ETL to somebody, and this copy of Hop, we don't say to them, hey, you need to set your project home directory or something like that. It just quickly configures it and just makes it kind of work. So I won't bother opening the README. I'll just start this tool. And like I said, it looks like a Windows application. That's what it's meant to be like. So this is built in Node.js. We have the ability to configure our source system, our Suite CRM source system, where the data is coming from, and then also the data warehouse, where the database is going, which is, like I said, Microsoft SQL Azure database. We also have the modules here, and these are those JSON documents I mentioned before. The application's picked up the modules that are in a certain directory and said, look, these are the ones that you can run. I've got a demo one, a dummy one, and some other ones. And then finally, we have a log files where you can download your log files. Now, what I'll do is, to save me typing in all the details for the connection, because it's all empty, I'm just going to quit that. And I'm just going to quickly go to what I installed earlier and just grab a config file. So just bear with me a second. Oops, I think it's here. So I'm going to take this config file, because this has all our database connections in it, and I'll pop it into the one I installed. So it's just kind of to save me typing it in. Did I not copy it? I think I copied it, perhaps. I'll try that again. Copy. And paste. So what happens is, obviously we want our config file to be encrypted as well. So this, the Node.js module does a few weird things. You can see that my password is encrypted in here and things like that. But on the front end, the users are going to want to type their password in, and obviously unencrypted. So on the front end, once it's boots up again, you can see my details are there now, my server and my username and password. You would type your password in its raw format here, and you can test your connection. They should be working. Yeah, so that's my source system, and that should be my remote system. Save your connection here. It will quickly run the Hop encrypt, and then encrypt the password, pop it into the config file. So all this is doing really is being able to inject that config file with the information that you type into the front end here. So we thought, it's a little easier. It looks a bit friendlier and things like that, and it should work. Now, if I go to my modules, I can also whip up Cygwin. It's hard to use Windows without a little bit of Linux, so I like to use Cygwin. there's probably better tools out there these days, but I think people keep talking about PowerShell and stuff, but I'm not too sure. I'll just stick with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm in my logs file. I'm just going to run my dummy module, which should run that piece of JSON, which runs 3 workflows, and those 3 workflows pause for about 10 seconds. So it's just to test that it's working. So I'll click the run module, and it says that the module is being executed and doesn't allow you to run anything else. Have a look here. I should have a dummy log, so I'll just tail that. And we can see that it's kicked off a copy of Hop. Now, the way that it's doing this isn't particularly exciting either. It's actually just running Hop command line. So it's doing, I can't remember what the Hop command line is. I was going to say it's not kitchen or pan. It's, I don't know, Hop something.
Hop run.
Hop run. Okay, I couldn't remember what it was. I'm still getting used to the terminology. So what it's doing is it's just running a command line. That's all it's doing at the moment. You know, we're kind of looking eventually to maybe having this application start a Hop server, not a cart server, a Hop server, and then maybe hit the API and do it that way instead. But at the moment, this is just a sort of first go at it sort of thing. So you can see this simple Hop execution. It ran the dummy job. Which was 3 workflows, which didn't do a lot. They just paused for a couple of seconds. Once they pause, so once they've run, we get a little log file that we can then, the one that I'm looking at here, we could export it, and we can pop it somewhere and save it to our disk and look at it. So really, all it is in the end is this kind of front end for Hop. I mean, in the end, it is Hop that's still there. We're not, other than stripping down what we don't need to try and reduce its file size, it's still a copy of Hop in there. So we've got our, for example, if you looked at our run analytics demo module.bat, which is our shell script, you can see it's just there you go, hop run.bat. That's what it's doing. And it's running the main job of our framework and passing in the module that we want to run, which in this case is the demo module. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. We have our ETL around here and various files, fact files for pipelines, as well as what we've got in here, the engine. And this is our copy of a Hop that has been, reduced in size, sort of thing. And that's about it for the packaging. I don't think I've missed anything from start to finish. I quite happily, if I wanted, I guess I can go and run the proper module, like this module here. Was kind of like, I don't think it's hacky. It's just a bit interesting. We've kind of had to patch things, so we wanted to give people as well a small thing to say, like, how far are you through your execution? So each module, if we got a total of 10 modules, and we just divide that, then we sit and say, look, each module it's going to be 10%. So all it does is it's tracking a little file in the background to say how long does it take to run a certain thing. So it took 6% to run the first part, then it finished it quite quickly. Not high tech, a lot like the guy that invented the Windows copy file dialog, where it never really was accurate, but it still gives the user sort of an idea of how their ETL is getting and things like that. Now, if it fails at the moment, I don't think it tells you it fails. It just says you can run it again. So there's definitely a lot of space here to build a lot more on the front end. We just thought, Windows users, they're familiar with Windows applications. So why not give them something like this, package it up, make it easy to install, and, a bit more familiar than maybe having to open a notepad and edit this, that, and the other. So that's the first half of my little presentation there. If you've got any thoughts, questions, feedback, or if you like pretty eye candy.
Yeah, like I said before, Harris, I like this, and not just for its simplicity, but there's always like in these BI analytics projects, there's always like how should I say this, like what we call like dimensional management, or usually it comes in the form of some Excel files and configuration files where certain parameters for the data warehouse can be put, maybe some I don't know, conversion tables, stuff like that, right? Stuff that isn't really covered in the OLTP application. It's not really covered by, let's say, Hop, and also not covered by the tooling on the front end, Power BI in this case. And so sometimes these things just fall through the cracks, and I think it would be great to have another tab in here to set also all sorts of parameters that Hop then simply can pick up from a JSON file, I guess, right? So I like that a lot for various reasons.
Yeah. I think. I mean, I remember my first attempt at something like this before, and I used Pentaho and the CDE, the dashboards and things like that, and using JavaScript, built a front end to talk to a cart server, because the cart server front end, it was very basic and things like that, but you could do so much cool stuff with it. And you thought, look, there's a whole API there in carts, and obviously in Hop. Now, and you can interact with that API and build some really cool stuff on the front end that allows you to run just ETL. I mean, this module thing is very bespoke, but you'll be able to interact with a Hop server, build a nice UI on top of it, sort of thing, and get a lot of interesting information and make it very user-free and friendly. So, although we built this as a Windows application with Electron, and it's not. I mean, to run it, you can run things on the command line here still, but to run it, you need a visual copy of Windows, which not, in any environment you probably won't have. What would be more interesting though, and I was talking to the guy who helped us develop this, is that we could use Node.js to put a layer over the top of the Hop server, only because the Hop server obviously is we can't edit it. I think it's still maybe using Jetty, or maybe it's changed. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's Jetty. I've been looking into ways of making that like potentially a cluster, maybe with Zookeeper or something like that. But for now, I think there's value in just keeping it very simple.
Yeah.
Usually when people want to have an orchestrator, I guess you can just throw it in something like Kubernetes or something,
Right.
and that will take care of when it goes down. It will just restart it, and that. For 99% of the cases, I guess that's good enough, right? But what I wanted to say is if you go that route, there's now also like the asynchronous web service, which is actually capable of giving you feedback concerning the progress of a workflow.
Oh, right. Okay.
So you can there's an example out there and on the documentation where you can basically. Let's suppose that you have these run things and you would have another line below it. What you would do is just every couple of seconds, you would do a status call to the Hop server, and it will give you a JSON back, and it will give you the ability to set a bunch of variables, just giving you feedback on a detailed level, as detailed as you want.
Yeah.
It can basically tell you exactly where it is in the workflow, and even in a pipeline, you can have a pipeline monitored, and basically in the GUI in your JSON in your Node.js app, basically explain how many records are processed.
Yeah,
because of the asynchronous nature of that web service. There's like a run and there's like a status request, which then gives you that information.
Yeah,
that was specifically built for things like this.
Yeah, as like I said, a bit of a hack. We sum up how many pipelines we're going to run, divide by 100%, figure out how far you are through it. Basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So some pipelines could take hours to run. So that's what I'm saying. It's not the most accurate thing in the world. You might think, wow, I'm at 99%, but you don't realize that last transformation is going to take years. You don't know. But at least you kind of know it is advancing. Kind of. But
well, like you said, it's Windows. People are used to it. Used to not being accurate. That's
it. Yeah, in fact, you know what? It might be comforting, not actually knowing how long it'll take, maybe.
Yeah.
So
cool stuff. Yeah.
Oh no, great.
I could imagine a tool like this being like the IntelliJ toolbox, where it keeps track of versions of Hop that are released, or makes it easy to deal with the upgrades of Hop, say by helping migrate somebody's config directory over from one location to another. Maybe even in the future doing some simple things like making sure that if they moved things around that the paths didn't break, or something like that.
Well, certainly, I think like all this, the ability to get this user friendliness, it is kind of more aimed towards the Windows sort of crowd and things like that, the people that want this easiness. But we think it looks pretty. It fits in with our kind of people that use Power BI. If you said to them, hey, you're using an open source tool like Apache Hop, prepared to edit text documents, they'll be like, uh-oh, might be a bit terrified of editing that piece of JSON. This is kind of just that thing on top to say, look, in the background it is powered by Hop. But on the front end, it's kind of simple and things like that. So, yeah.
Is it possible to start Hop and present some data as a connection just from Hop, like it was in data integration long ago?
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that, Brandon. What was that?
So you can, in data integration in the past, you could right-click on, say, a dummy step and set it as a data source. And then there was a client driver that was a JDBC driver, and you could actually connect to it. And
that's a good. I mean, that's obviously a question for Matt. I remember the thing you're talking about though. You could create the, what was it? Not the PDI : // It's like a JDBC.
It was a thin client, a JDBC driver, but it wasn't really used all that much. What we do have is a web service, right? So you can basically do the same thing, but then choose the output of the pipeline. So in the web service metadata, you can specify which pipeline needs to run, which transform to take the data from, and which fields. And then you can specify also what the format is. For example, JSON or XML, I guess, or HTML as popular output formats. So you can spit out anything you want, not just JDBC, which is, I guess, more practical for these kind of applications. But they are synchronous, so they will run in sync. So you have to wait for the pipeline to finish. So it's more geared towards things that are going to finish quite quickly. Yeah.
I think recently, one of the components that we have here, which I'm not going to go over, but you'll see where it is. We wanted to build an API, and I'm sitting thinking, well, I could learn Node.js and write my own API, or I could just use Hop for it. And I started getting into it, and I built a Hop API that you could make requests from easily, But then I started to get a bit too deep and thought maybe I can send data to it and do this. And I thought, okay, it's too much now. I've asked too much of Hop, I think, in this case. And maybe I should just go for a conventional sort of a REST API sort of thing. But as a service, Brandon, and if you need to get data, then like Matt was saying, you can create these APIs, and it's great. It's really easy to use. Things I did use the PDI endpoint thing before, or the thin layer JDBC driver sort of thing before, and it was useful. But I think I only used it once. I think I used the API more, and then.
Originally, I created it to run on Mondrian, and that's how OpenTower used that, I guess, mostly. They built like a whole stack on top of it, and they did a good job with the user interface and everything, but it was a lot of code for very little bang on the buck, because we were not really, if we ever want to do that again, I probably wouldn't write a whole SQL parser either. I probably would follow something like the SQL transform in Beam, where it's really like an ELT exercise push down instead of what was written back then. But probably using some of the libraries that I don't know, existing open source libraries for SQL parsing, extending that. It will be a bit more work, but it will be more future resilient, I guess, future proof.
It certainly was a cool, and it's a cool feature. And I think that the one time I used it was because I needed Mondrian to connect to something that was really dynamic, so I had to run ETL in the background, which was cool. But only ever used it once, I think, myself, fortunately. Although it was nice to have it at the time. So, if there's any more questions at all on that, if not, I'll move on to the Stripe API stuff.
Please.
Okie dokie. So where we look. I was here. Let's do this and the little demo. So like I said, what happens is for this particular project, people, we get them to come to our website, and we want them to come in and either do one or two things: either ask for a trial, or pay us. And so we've got this sort of basic website and subscription form, and there's two different types of data that we collect. If you happen to pay us, then it goes into a Stripe. If you're not familiar with Stripe, Stripe is an online payment processor. It's pretty popular and things like that. And so if you happen to fill in the form, it will place your data into Stripe, into their payment system. If you happen to want a trial, then it sends us an email, and we parse that instead. So we have a JSON API in Stripe, and we have emails in a box. At that point, we want to get that data. So once you've filled in that form, we do a couple of things with the Hop. Now, at the moment, I can run it manually, but we probably put it on to run every minute or two or something like that. So it's not, like live Kafka kind of stuff. It's just simply, we're going to make these requests. So with Hop, this is where we're using Hop in another place. This is backend. We'll use Apache Hop to do two things, and we will either pull emails, we'll do both. Pull emails, and we'll also make API requests from the Stripe payments JSON API. Once we've made that request and we've done a bit of work, we will send the person a key. They'll be using this with their Power BI because they need that key, whether it's free or not. And then we'll insert a record into our subscription database. At that point, once it's in the subscription database, they can use Power BI, install their Power BI template. This is back to what we did before. They install the Power BI templates, and then they can make their authentication requests. Where the authentication request originally was being made, that's where I tried to use Hop there as well. But unfortunately, there was issues, just asking too much of a tool that wasn't built for building APIs. So we built a little Node.js layer there instead. Now, the interesting part was the actual parsing of the Stripe data. And I think in over the years, I've done lots of JSON parsing because, most APIs, JSON APIs is where you get your data from. And we came across the Stripe API. We needed to get data from them and to process our subscriptions. But there were some challenges, and the challenges were a bit odd. So when we made a request, the request that we make, we can only get 100 objects. Doesn't matter what those objects are, users or products or subscriptions. Each request that we made, it was 100 objects that we were allowed. And the way that it worked is that some APIs might tell you how many pages you've got of data, to say, look, you've got 50 pages of data, so 50 times your 100. But in this case, the Stripe one's a bit odd. And the Stripe one, well, at least for me anyway, the Stripe one was using this cursor-based sort of navigation. And what would happen is when you made your first request, at the very bottom of your 100 records, if you have 100 records, obviously, at the very bottom, you would have this little property at the bottom, and it was the has more equals true. And when I thought about this, I thought, well, look, we need to make a request. I need to have Hop make a request to this API and get some data. And it'll get 100 records. At the bottom, it'll have this has more is true. And I'll think, okay, well, now I know that there's more data. I need to take the last ID. And this example here is XYZ123. I need to get that last ID and pass it to the next request, because that's what the API wants. It wants the last ID of your previous request to know where to start from paging of the next request. So getting the last ID isn't hard, and knowing that we have more records isn't hard either. I think the issue was that it kind of comes to this thing where, I'm not, in PDI, usually you would know what you're going to loop before you loop it. So you sit and think, I've got 100 customers I want to loop. Now I'll create my loop and do it. In this case, we didn't know when we were going to run out of objects. So the first 100 objects would come in. We'd have the has more equals true. The next maybe 50 objects come in because we have 150 records, and the has more equals false. So what we wanted to do is look at this has more property and say, look, we've got to do a loop, and we don't know when we need to finish. And I thought to myself, I don't generally do loops like this. And I think it's frowned upon in PDI as well. And I went looking for it, and I came across a book, and I can't remember which book it was. I actually bought the book just so I could see the example. And they created a loop where it was kind of like you'd expect, a transformation or a job, linking to a job, coming down to a dummy step, and then going back to the original job, kind of like a triangle. And that's always bugged me. I always thought, you can't really do that, or it doesn't work correctly. And funnily enough, in Hop, if you try to do that, create that sort of workflow, it actually stops you from doing it, which is cool because it makes sense that it shouldn't really work. So I'm not sure why it was in this book. I did test it in PDI. It did work. I didn't feel comfortable about it, but it kind of left me in a bit of a sticky situation to say, like, how can I do this do while loop and keep pulling my data? At this point, I messaged Matt and asked, and there's and lo and behold, he actually had a step for this, a step that's not in PDI, that I'm very lucky was in Hop. So that was quite cool. I was like, wow, look at that. It's actually, I expected to write War and Peace to Matt to explain to him my complex situation and him to come up with solutions and things. He said, no, it's easy. It's a step. So
action.
Sorry?
It's an action.
Okay, action. Sorry, action, not a step.
No worries.
I will get the lingo. So like I said, we use Hop to make these API requests and pass the JSON. We don't know how many requests we need to make, so we need to create a loop, and we use an action called a hop repeat. Oh, crap! An action, not a step, an action. And it's actually really super helpful. And I'll show you how we did the ETL for that in just a second. Like I said, in a nutshell here, what we do is we can optimize this a bit more, but it's still a work in progress. We get our initial request, and that returns X amount of objects. In our case, it's going to be more than 100. When it's more than 100 and we hit the execute step, we've stored the value. It will be more than 100. So we say, do we have more rows with the has more equals true? At which point we run another pipeline, and then we repeat, and we go back and we check, is it true again? And we can keep going around. And this is interesting logic, not particularly complex if you were programming it, but in PDI a bit funny, and in Hop really easy to do, which was quite nice. Obviously, when there's no more records, it's false and it finishes. So what I'll do then is I'm just going to show you that little bit of ETL. I think it's on my Windows machine. Yeah. So let's have a look. Just do a couple of bits here. Oops. So I had to change my resolution so people could actually see it, and now it's a bit chunky for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just truncate a couple of tables here and just kind of show you how this process works. So I'll just, there's my data warehouse. I'm just going to invalidate this. And let's check. I've got a bunch of subscriptions. I'm going to truncate a couple of tables. These are things like our Stripe subscriptions, our trial customers, trial subscriptions, and finally our subscriptions table. So I've truncated everything, and I'm just going to go straight in and just show you how it kind of works. So we've got a bit of ETL that gets our trial subscriptions, another one that gets our trial, our Stripe products. This is all from Stripe. And then we're going to do some looping of our customers and subscriptions because we expect a lot of customers and subscriptions, more than 100. So we'll have to do the looping. On the trial subscriptions, it's kind of straightforward. We're pulling in emails, and the email has a bit of CSV data. And I think I may have that here. And yeah, so here's a sample email that is sent from the website, and it gives us a bit of CSV data. There's a free man, and he works for Black Mesa. Probably should have got Gordon Freeman, but there you go. So we pull in our emails, and a couple of these steps had issues. Thanks to Sergio for helping me get those fixed. We split it up and we figure out if they're a new customer or not, and then we insert our record. So the email parsing is relatively straightforward, nothing magical. Getting products is not magical either. So we're going to move to the looping of Stripe customers, or in this case, I'll just go to subscriptions. It's the same idea. So on the looping of Stripe subscriptions, we start off with this transformation here, getting Stripe subscriptions, and it looks a bit like this. So in my API now, for testing purposes, although the API supports 100, I just reduced it down to 3 so I could prove the looping part. So I'm going to ask for 3 records from the API. At the end of those 3 records, my has more will be true because we do have more than 3 records, and then it'll do the loop and actually get the additional records afterwards. So it says the first 100, but it's actually the first 3. We do a query, and then we pass our results. And down here, with our query, we pass a little bit more information, just pull that property out and say, do we have more? And we set it as a variable because in our loop subscriptions, which is running here, we want a variable to exist in this particular workflow. So we're going to set that variable in the parent, in the workflow. And here's some generic boring stuff where what we do is we insert the record of the subscription, but we also figure out what was the last ID in our first 100 records, because we'll need that as well. So we have the last ID, and we know we're going to have more. And then it brings us to the more interesting step, this magical step, which, I spoke to Matt, expected a big problem to make it work, and in about 30 seconds, he'd give me a solution to it, which was helpful. Oops, apology. So if I go back to my loop subscriptions, this repeat step, all it does is it's going to run another piece of ETL just called getting additional Stripe subscriptions. Now I could squish the getting the first Stripe subscriptions and additional ones into one transformation, but at the moment they're two transformations. So if I have a quick look at it, all it's going to do, it's the same thing as it did before. So I could optimize this at some point. The difference is, instead of just getting the first 100 records, we are pulling in the ID, the last ID that we want to kick off the next 100 objects. So this one requires an ID, and it will do the next 100 objects. If we look at the actual step itself, though, this is the more interesting part. This is the repeat step. Oops, I need to edit the actions. And so this step was kind of cool. So we're going to do the get additional subscriptions, which I think, as I mentioned earlier, was along here. We are going to get our initial objects and execute the repeat step, which then gets additional objects. And this step here, it says, look, stop repeating when a variable is set. And it's this has more. I'm sort of saying, the value would be 0. So usually if I've got a has more, it'll be 1. If it's a 0, it'll stop the repeating. And when this repeater step kicks off, it just asks for variables to pass in. And I say, look, just take the subscription ID. So when the initial subscriptions kick off, we get 3 records. The has more equals 1 in this case. We then send the has more plus the ID, the subscription ID, to the repeat step. Because the has more equals 1, the repeater will kick off. It'll then consume our additional subscription ID at the very end from our previous request, and it will repeat. Once it's done that, obviously our get additional objects is just doing the same thing. It's saying, do you still have more? Do you have more records? And what is the last ID of the last request you made? At which point it'll go back to the loop and continue the loop, and just continues and continues until it's finished. So if I just save this and run it, I'm kind of hoping that I'll get some good log stuff out. We should see the loop and how it works, hopefully. So it gets the emails, it gets some products and things like that. And it loops the subscriptions. And I'll show you in the log where it's done our loop. So that's it finished. Now if we have a look here, this is the interesting part. So round about, can't see where it's starting. Here it is. The get Stripe subscriptions kicks off. And in this case, it pulls out 3 subscriptions. So I've limited it to 3 for this demo. Now it's limited to 3, and the has more equals true in this case. So I think it's maybe in the log file here somewhere. Maybe it's not. I'm not too sure. I put it into the log. No, maybe not. Once it got to the end of those 3 records, it has more equaled true or 1. So it sat there and took us down to the repeater step, which did the get additionals, and at which point it pulled in the 2 additional records. We only have 5 customers in this database, but that's how we go through them and then loop our Stripe information. As far as parsing the JSON is concerned, the JSON is pretty standard and not hard to write using JSON path. The more interesting part was the fact that we can hit the Stripe API, and initially this is just for subscription management, so that we can manage our customers and things. But at the same time, if you wanted to build a data warehouse based on all your Stripe data, then it would be a bit of a pain to write. But here you could write enough ETL to loop through all your customers, products, subscriptions, payments, everything like that. And you could pull all your data down, pop it into a data warehouse, build a dashboard, possibly a Power BI dashboard. And that's about that. So the end result of all this madness is that we have possibly, dashboards in the end. They look, it's a bit hard to see on these ones, but in the end, we build these Power BI dashboards. So just to finish off, the Suite CRM pulled across to Azure using Apache Hop in our data warehouse. Then people that sign up for the application are able to download this template application. And when they download that template application, they have their data, which is loaded, again, via Apache Hop. You can then run our dashboards, which should look relatively pretty. If you like pretty dashboards, that's the other part, I guess. And, we're eagerly awaiting stuff from Matt and Bart and the rest of the guys for their sort of BI front end. But until then, we're using our Power BI to build our dashboards, which, looks pretty enough if you like Microsoft things. So, and that's about it, guys. I mean, if you've got any questions about my ETL, which is probably more interesting than the dashboards, that makes sense what I was trying to convey there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Looks great.
Yep.
How is it setting up the API calls? I mean, do you have any trouble with authentication or anything like that? How is that these days?
Yeah, no, I mean, we were very lucky in this case. A lot of APIs, obviously, there's OAuth authentication. In this case, not so much. This is a private key. You can generate the key on the obviously the Stripe payments, pull it down, pass it through the URL and things like that. There are APIs that we wanted to work with in the end, and this is again probably a question from Matt and about the authentication. When you come to like OAuth authentication sort of APIs, I'm not sure that's supported at the moment or if it's in the plans to do something like that, but certainly it would be helpful, I think, for other APIs.
Yeah, most definitely. I've been obviously now playing with Kubernetes and AWS and stuff like that. The ETL processes are usually like a spider in the web, right?
Yeah.
It would be very useful to have things on hand like access key, secret key, stuff like that, or the means to call the proper authenticator at AWS to get authenticated, stuff like that. It's just a matter of time before that stuff gets in, right?
Yeah, I saw, I think, examples in Pentaho, and the examples were using JavaScript steps and external libraries and all sorts of crazy stuff to make it work. And it was so outdated that it just didn't work anymore anyway, sort of thing. So you were kind of stuck. PDI just, I don't think, couldn't really do it. And it wasn't a big deal, I guess. It's just that if you wanted to be able to do it, it was a useful thing to be able to hit these APIs. But in this case, the Stripe API, no, it doesn't care. Secret key, usernames, passwords, and things like that. It's straightforward, so it wasn't difficult to interact with it. But what was particularly impressive and useful was that repeater step, because without it, it would have been a bit stuck there, I think.
Yeah, you can remove the entropy job entry. That is actually meant if you repeat a workflow.
Oh, let's see.
So if the repeat action would call a workflow, in that workflow you can then say end repeat, and then it will drop out of the repeat loop.
Oh, I see. Yes.
So
yeah.
you can repeat pipelines, which is the simple case. In your case, it's great, right? You don't need anything else. But you can also repeat pipelines with their own workflow in there, right? Their own logic.
Okay, so I don't need that step. Yeah,
it's no problem. It acts just like a dummy in this scenario.
Right. Okay.
But if you would loop over loop Stripe subscriptions, then it would end loop, and then it would have a loop inside a loop. It could make sense to do it, so that's why it's not. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's certainly very useful. Like I said, it brings together the entire thing that we have here, sort of thing, from end to end, from our Suite CRM all the way through to our data warehouse, managing our Stripe API, being able to give subscribers keys, send out emails. I mean, it does actually send out emails. I disabled it because I keep sending emails, too many emails. But here, once you've it's been authenticated and you get your thing, it does send out the emails. And thanks to Sergio for doing that, because he did fix it. So that's about everything I have. I said it was a bit underwhelming, but I got, yeah, thank you. Check those pictures, eh? So thanks to Matt and to Sergio, because particularly you're fixing my issues, because there were a few bugs in Hop, which I think I might have tried to get to the top of the list sneakily by just messaging you directly and saying if you could fix that for me. So I do appreciate that. I also put 2 crowns on you like that.
Oh, I'm so honored.
Yeah, you like
I
that.
bet Sergio is as well.
I think I like the pictures because I've got them when you're both blinking, which looks crazy. I think it's from the last.
Yeah, you timed it perfectly.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's so yeah, that's about it, guys. I'm happy to answer any questions I can answer. If not, I can pass it back to Matt or Bart.
Yeah, and that repeat job entry is available on Kettle as well. It's part of the Needful Things plugin.
All right.
That got thrown into the porting exercise. And just because you need it, right? You know, once you do a little bit of file shenanigans or whatever you need just to repeat until, yeah. I don't know why it never happened in Kettle or PDI. So at some point I just wrote it. It was called Needful Things, called after the horror novel from Stephen King, obviously. Because it's such a shit show that simple basic operations were so hard to do in Kettle. So we just tried to solve those. Once you get the opportunity, it wasn't really hard to write. And it's easy to create integration tests for it now. So yeah, why not? Good stuff. Harris, thanks a lot for presenting.
Yeah. Were you underwhelmed in the end? Come on.
No, I think it's really useful.
Well, I liked how you really considered the end user, from start to finish, and distribution and handoff, and what that whole experience would be. I think it'll represent Hop well, and it shows people, how to incorporate otherwise invisible programming logic, in a data tool. And I've always liked that about this particular tool, that ordinarily people would have run off and coded this in pick a language, .NET or Java or something like that, and then it's got to live a totally different life that has consequences. So I think this is great. Thank you.
I think my first, what was it? And this is almost over, probably about 15 years ago. I think my first sort of contribution to Pentaho or PDI was writing an installer, which Pentaho was very, very, very generous and sent me a iTunes gift card. I didn't have an iPhone or an iPad or an iPod or whatever it was, but it's like very kind. I also spelt integration wrong on the installer. That was a while ago, Matt, if you remember that. That was just because I thought, I'll take it. And instead of just unzipping it, which is all it was, an unzipper, but it looked nice, kind of looked fancy, but didn't do much, just spelt wrong. And yeah, that's
but yeah, I agree with you, Brandon, is that and I've been more vocal about this even in my mails to the Flink community, and say like Apache Hop as a data integration tool wants to sit on the side of organizations that want to simplify, reduce maintenance costs, right? Make things easy for the users. This idea that you can just edit a JSON file or a YAML file or an XML file, like you said, Harris, it's just wrong. Users in general won't be able to do that. Otherwise, they would be working for an IT department. They would be getting another job quite quickly, right? And so making things really simple, yeah, I can see a lot of use cases for that Node.js thing where you can quickly add more screens and Hop picks up the files in the background. I think that's really useful in general.
It's pretty interesting that you can think of a tool like this outside of just doing ETL, because you have a lot of other tools coming to the scenes that are low code, no code. And, if you think about, what we're doing is not just empowering people to transform data and do data logistics, getting it from A to B, but also let them potentially create process workflows, that sort of match up with something in their business or something they're doing. Like he's processing subscriptions and making some of that logic work. That's stuff that makes business work, not just makes a nice cube to do look back analytics on. I think that's pretty powerful, because people could mock up their ideas and they have a lot of logging and sort of recovery options, in the way that they're dealing with the data. It's just a really interesting use case, because otherwise you write an app and it's invisible and people are materializing things to tables and to disks, and it better go right, and they have to remember every little detail, if they do that in code. But it's just easier to see it in ETL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Great, Harris. Always good to see you.
Yeah, it's this does have wine in it, by the way, but it was only a cup. So there you go.
Yep.
No, guys, unless there's any other questions, then I'm finished with that. It's I hope it was interesting. It's how we're using Hop, and honestly, I never found there's always places I can use. Originally PDI, but with PDI's kind of not really working as well as it should do. Finding Hop and having it that small was really cool. Because we can think of all sorts of applications that we can use it for and stuff like that, So it's always filling gaps. It's not just an ETL tool or a data engineering tool. You can use it to use anything that you can think of. Sort of
orchestration platform, Harris.
Right. So yeah, it's I said very cool tool. Enjoying all the updates and things like that. Works really well. Actually works. So that's something. Dan left without saying goodbye. Look at that. Unbelievable.
All right. It was good seeing you all.
Yeah.
Morning.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.